Welcome to Echo of Crime YouTube channel. In the United States, there is a sentence more final than almost any other: life without the possibility of parole. Often referred to as LWOP, it is a punishment that guarantees one outcome. The person sentenced will die in prison. There will be no parole hearing, no chance for early release, and no consideration of rehabilitation. From the moment the sentence is handed down, the future is sealed. For tens of thousands of inmates across America, time no longer moves toward freedom, only toward survival. The rise of life without parole is closely tied to America's tough-on-crime era, particularly from the 1970s through the 1990s. As violent crime rates increased and public fear grew, lawmakers responded with harsher sentencing laws. Mandatory minimums, three-strikes policies, and expanded use of LWOP were introduced as tools to protect society and deliver permanent justice for the most serious crimes. In many cases, LWOP became an alternative to the death penalty, offering punishment without execution, but with the same sense of finality. Unlike other life sentences, parole is not part of the equation. Inmates serving LWOP are told directly by judges that they will never walk free again. For some, this sentence is imposed after highly publicized murders or multiple violent offenses. For others, especially in earlier decades, LWOP was handed down with little consideration for age, background, or the possibility of change. Once sentenced, appeals are limited, and even exemplary behavior inside prison does not alter the outcome. LWOP inmates are housed across the country, from large state prisons to the most restrictive federal facilities, including ADX Florence, often called the most secure prison in the United States. While conditions vary by facility, the reality is similar everywhere: strict routines, controlled movement, and a life structured entirely by the prison system. Days are measured by counts, meals, and lockdowns, not by progress or milestones. The psychological weight of life without parole is immense. Many inmates describe the sentence as a form of living death. The absence of hope changes how time is experienced. Years blur together. Birthdays, holidays, and family milestones pass without meaning. Parents die, children grow up, and entire eras fade while inmates remain locked inside the same walls. Aging behind bars becomes inevitable, with many LWOP prisoners developing serious health issues long before old age. Yet LWOP is not just a punishment for individuals. It is a statement by the justice system. It declares that some crimes are so severe that rehabilitation is no longer considered relevant. The sentence is not designed to correct behavior or prepare someone for re-entry into society. It exists solely to remove a person permanently from the public. In doing so, it raises difficult questions about justice, mercy, and whether punishment should ever be absolute. Life without parole is not simply a long prison sentence. It is the end of possibility. It is a decision made in a courtroom that echoes for decades inside prison walls. For those who receive it, the sentence reshapes every aspect of existence, setting the stage for a life defined not by what comes next, but by what will never come again. Once an inmate receives a sentence of life without parole, the reality of what that decision means begins to unfold slowly, but relentlessly. Unlike prisoners who can count down toward a parole hearing or a release date, LWOP inmates wake up each day knowing there is no finish line. From the first night inside a maximum security facility, the sentence becomes psychological as much as physical. Hope, which sustains many incarcerated people, is officially removed from the equation. Daily life for those serving LWOP is rigid and repetitive. Movement is tightly controlled, interactions are limited, and every aspect of existence is dictated by institutional rules. In higher security prisons, inmates may spend most of their day inside small concrete cells, leaving only for meals, showers, or brief recreation. In facilities like ADX Florence, conditions are even more extreme, with inmates spending up to 23 hours a day in isolation. For someone who will never leave prison, this level of confinement stretches not for months or years, but for decades. Over time, the psychological effects of life without parole become impossible to ignore. Studies and first-hand accounts show high rates of depression, anxiety, and emotional withdrawal among LWOP inmates. Many struggle with the concept of time itself. Days lose meaning when there is nothing to look forward to. Seasons change, presidents come and go, technology evolves. But inside prison walls, life remains frozen. Some inmates describe the experience as watching the world move on through a window they will never open. Aging behind bars presents another harsh reality. LWOP inmates grow old in facilities originally designed for young, able-bodied men. As years pass, prisons become de facto nursing homes, ill-equipped to handle chronic illness, mobility issues, and end-of-life care. Inmates who entered prison in their 20s or 30s often reach their 60s and 70s still confined, dependent on prison medical systems that are often overburdened. Many will die inside prison infirmaries, far from family and any sense of normal life. Family relationships also deteriorate over time. Visits become less frequent as relatives age, move away, or pass on. Children grow up without parents. Spouses move on. For LWOP inmates, connection to the outside world slowly fades, replaced by a closed environment where social interactions are limited to other incarcerated people and correctional staff. Even those who try to maintain relationships often find that decades of separation are impossible to overcome. Despite the permanence of their sentences, some LWOP inmates attempt to build meaning within prison walls. They work prison jobs, mentor younger inmates, pursue education, or participate in limited rehabilitation programs, even knowing these efforts will never lead to release. Critics argue that denying parole eliminates incentives for growth, while supporters believe that accountability does not require the promise of freedom. This tension lies at the heart of the LWOP debate. The true cost of life without parole, not just as a legal punishment, but as a lifelong condition. It is a sentence that reshapes identity, erodes hope, and forces people to confront the reality of permanent confinement. For those serving LWOP, prison is no longer a phase of life. It becomes life itself. As the number of people serving life without parole grew, the sentence itself became one of the most controversial punishments in the American justice system. What was once considered a necessary response to the most extreme crimes began to raise serious legal, moral, and societal questions. Critics argued that LWOP removes any possibility of redemption, effectively declaring that people are beyond change. Supporters countered that some crimes are so severe that permanent punishment is the only just response. This divide has shaped decades of debate and continues to influence how courts and lawmakers approach sentencing. One of the most significant shifts in the LWOP conversation came through the courts. Over time, legal challenges questioned whether it was constitutional to impose life without parole on juveniles. The argument was not that serious crimes should go unpunished, but that sentencing someone to die in prison for actions committed as a minor ignored the capacity for growth and change. These rulings did not eliminate LWOP entirely, but they reshaped its use, forcing states to reconsider automatic life sentences for younger offenders. For adult inmates, however, LWOP largely remained untouched. At the state level, policies vary widely. Some states rely heavily on life without parole, while others have moved toward sentence reviews or expanded parole eligibility after long periods of incarceration. These reforms were often driven by overcrowded prisons, rising costs, and a growing population of elderly inmates who posed little public safety risk. Even so, thousands of people remain locked into sentences that offer no mechanism for reconsideration, regardless of behavior, remorse, or decades of change. The financial and human costs of LWOP have also become impossible to ignore. Housing inmates for life is expensive, particularly as medical needs increase with age. Prisons originally designed for punishment have become long-term care facilities, struggling to provide adequate health care for aging populations. At the same time, families of LWOP inmates live with a different kind of sentence, one defined by permanent separation, unresolved grief, and the knowledge that their loved one will never come home. For victims' families, LWOP carries its own complexity. Some see it as the only acceptable form of justice, ensuring the person responsible can never harm anyone again. Others find that permanent punishment does not bring the closure they expected. The absence of parole hearings removes the chance for dialogue, accountability, or acknowledgement of harm in later years. Justice, for many, becomes a fixed outcome rather than an ongoing process. Today, life without parole stands at the center of a larger question about what punishment is meant to accomplish. Is the goal to protect society, to punish wrongdoing, to rehabilitate, or some combination of all three? LWOP answers that question with finality. It chooses permanent removal over transformation. Whether that choice reflects justice or resignation remains deeply contested. Life without parole is not just a sentence. It is a lifelong condition imposed by the state. For those who receive it, every future moment is defined by confinement. And for America, LWOP remains a mirror, reflecting how the nation balances safety, accountability, mercy, and the belief or disbelief in the possibility of change.